Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight, and we'll come in order. There's coffee over next to the kitchen if you want to get some coffee tonight. There's also some water and a little lemonade left from dinner. Bathrooms on either side of the stage, and the bees arrived today, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. We are really glad that you're here for this wonderful evening with the leaders from the Episcopal Church that we're so privileged to have in the diocese yesterday through tomorrow, I think. And so we're glad for that. Let's open with a word of prayer. The Lord be with you. Amen. Let us pray. Gracious God, it is with a sense of joy and wonder in all your works, and with the gift of life that we receive on this day, that we gather here in your name, in this space, in this beautiful part of our country, seeking to serve you and glorify you in our lives. Open us to your spirit of wisdom and grace. Give us inquiring and discerning hearts as we learn more about ourselves and others. Fill us with your spirit of joy, of wonder, of the gift that we share with all humanity and all creation in this life we have. For our time together, may we be blessed this night, that we might be a blessing to others. We ask it all in your holy name. Amen. Amen. Well, it's our great delight to have the Reverend Canon Stephanie Spellers, who is on the Presiding Bishop's staff. She's the Canon for Evangelism, Reconciliation, and Creation. And she does this kind of traveling roadshow diocese by diocese, and we're delighted to have her here in our diocese. She's the author of several books, including Radical Welcome, Embracing God, the Other, and the Spirit of Transformation. Also, The Episcopal Way, and with Eric Law, co-authored Companions on the Episcopal Way. She is a native of Kentucky and has degrees from Episcopal Divinity School and Harvard Divinity School, and today she makes her home in the Harlem neighborhood of New York City. Along with her tonight from the Presiding Bishop's staff is Jeremy Tackett as well. Jeremy is the Episcopal Church's digital evangelist. That's what I want to be when I grow up. A digital evangelist. Wow. He's doing all sorts of exciting things with the Episcopal Church. The clergy of the diocese got to hear both of them today. I think Stephanie's going to guide us tonight, but they're both around to answer any questions or engage in conversation after the evening is over as well. Would you join me in welcoming Canon Stephanie Spellers?
Stand as prayer for the human family. Oh
God, you made us in your own image and redeemed us through Jesus, your Son. Look with compassion on the whole human family. Take away the arrogance and hatred which affect our hearts. Break down the walls that separate us. Unite us in bonds of love, and work through our struggle and confusion to accomplish your purposes on earth. That in your good time, all nations and races may serve you in harmony around your heavenly throne. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Now Simon says your name. Good evening, St. Mark's and many more. Good evening.
Good evening.
I am happy to be with you. I'm Stephanie Spellers, Presiding Bishop's Canon for Evangelism, Reconciliation, the Care of Creation. And so I bring you greetings from Presiding Bishop Curry and from our entire church-wide team. We are so grateful anytime people come out and say that we want to learn together, walk together, wade in the water together. I have to say that it feels a bit like a return coming here to St. Mark's. My dear friend Devin McLaughlin, who's a priest now in England, used to serve here at St. Mark's, and so I was constantly coming through the area and visiting and hanging out with him. I remember I was here the first month that Church of the Apostles had been launched.
Wow.
So this was like back in 2004, I think, and got to like sit on the porch with Karen Ward and talk about how she had just begun this new ministry here in Seattle, and I was about to start a new ministry called The Crossing in Boston. And you all inspired me then, you inspire me now. I've done 3 weddings, I was counting, 3 weddings here in the greater Seattle area, so I think I've actually done more here than in the cities I've lived. Love is in the air, I don't know. So anyway, all of that is just to say that I've watched you, prayed for and with you, hoped for, you've been inspired by you, and it makes it even sweeter now to be with you this evening. It's sweet too because as we were acknowledging last night when we started off in Sammamish, and thank you Steve Dancy for the welcome, the incredible welcome, as well as your rector Steve Thomas.
Yes.
Thomason. I was thinking Thomason, but then I stopped. I should have kept going. All right. And so many more. Can we just thank them for their hospitality? One of the things that we were acknowledging last night is that it feels like these conversations are happening more and more in a way that's a blessing. It's a blessing because it feels like the Holy Spirit is opening something up in us that frankly needed to get opened up. We've been walking around carrying so much. And church isn't the place where you can have the hard conversations. Where can't you? So it feels like God is leading us into a place of courage and hope, and it feels kind of like we're moving toward being a movement. Amen? Amen. I felt that, I should say amen. And what I love is that this is not just a social movement. We are talking here about the Jesus movement. Jesus gathered people up and asked them to dedicate their lives to a way of unselfish love. He asked them to form loving, liberating, life-giving relationships with God and with each other and with the whole creation, and to make this world one that is more loving, liberating, and life-giving too. I'm grateful to be a part of this Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. And one of my favorite things is to invite people to start to kind of put those words in our own mouths. So just join me down in claiming it. Just repeat after me. We are the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. Amen. Amen. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. All right, we got good sound Episcopalian. follow Jesus. We need serious followers of Jesus who practice his loving, liberating, and life-giving way with our whole hearts. I'm still recalling, just as I was kind of sitting today even and reflecting, I was recalling that blissful moment in 2008 when Barack Obama was elected, and how it didn't even matter what party you were a part of, everybody was celebrating that America had achieved this moment when we had somehow fulfilled our purpose, our promise, freedom and dignity for all. Do you remember what we were doing in 08 when that happened? But now, we realize that throughout that 8-year period, millions of Americans were feeling more and more alienated from their own country. America wasn't for them or for maybe some of you here, just a city on a hill. It was the pinnacle of white civilization. That was America's promise. That's America's identity. And a black president meant that America was not, definitionally, was not great anymore. Think about it. America was not America anymore. And that's when the hate crimes and the bullying surged. That's when the videos of black and brown people killed by cops who were sworn to protect us, those videos raced across our screens and broke our hearts, and they still do. There was open warfare against immigrants, Jews, refugees, and then in 2016, the hate went into hyperdrive. White supremacist statements, behaviors, practices, policies that would have shocked most Americans a few years earlier were simply something we began to shrug at. And this wasn't just somewhere else, some other part of America. A few years back, I was visiting here in the Pacific Northwest, and I saw some graffiti. And it was clear that one group, one artist had written the graffiti, and then another had responded to it with a message. And one of the messages said, and I can't even say it all here, but F the chinks. And then below that, it said, kill the whites. And I remember looking at it and thinking at first, wow, black people are not the problem here. And then I thought, America, I love you. America, you are so deeply broken everywhere. Now more than ever, here in the Pacific Northwest and across the land, we need some serious Jesus followers. Not just worshipers, but healers and lovers and reconcilers in Jesus' name. We need church people to become Jesus movement people. And so, if you want that, you're going to have to say so. And so I invite you again to just say it with me, repeating as we go. We are the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement. Well, if we mean what we say there, be careful what you wish for. Be careful, because this is deep structural work we're talking about. This is excavation and reconstruction. This is lifelong formation and reformation. And I promise you this, people are going to get angry at you. Other people are going to get anxious in your presence. If you really mean to be a part of this Jesus movement, a reconciler, a lover, a healer, some people are going to get just plain tired of you. Some people will say, that's really just a problem in the South. There's no racism here. Some people will say, well, we had a black president and now we have a black presiding bishop. We've arrived. Over and over, you will hear the perennial question, the one that is the title for this talk. Are we there yet? When can we stop talking about race? when they ask you that, and they will, you need to be ready. You need to be ready, and you need to covenant for a life of practice and formation and transformation. You need to reserve time and energy for year after year of intimate, brave conversations and strategic interventions into a system of white supremacy that regenerates itself every generation. How do we do that? How do we become that kind of community of healers, reconcilers, and lovers? How do we follow Jesus in his loving, liberating, life-giving way of reconciliation? Well, if you really want to live as reconcilers and healers in the Jesus movement, realize what reconciliation is and what it is not. Reconciliation is not just being nice to your neighbors. And it's not just, can't we all just get along? Sorry, Rodney King. It's not just diversity and representation within basically unchanged structures. No. Reconciliation is dismantling oppressive systems. Reconciliation is bringing down the walls within us and between us. It's truth-telling, it's repentance, it's forgiveness, it's amendment of life. It's committing to the long work of repair and healing. Healing what is broken in us and around us, and it's walking together on a long road toward becoming the beloved community. So again, if you really want to live as reconcilers and healers in the Jesus movement, then you're going to need a dream. You're going to need a dream that will carry you through the fire. Now, in 2015, our church asked our presiding bishop and president of the House of Deputies, we said, we need some help. And we need our top leaders, the top leaders of our church, we need y'all to cast a vision. Give us something to dream toward. And so the presiding bishop and the president of the House of Deputies, they prayed and they reflected, and they engaged dozens of leaders and thinkers. And in May of 2017, they offered up this. They shared with us the Becoming Beloved Community vision and commitment to racial reconciliation and healing justice. You have handouts here on your tables. Feel free to take one. And then there's one of these larger, and this is just kind of a giveaway. If anybody wants to grab it first, it's yours. But another version of this image for you to pray with and walk with. But, I'm really grateful because what they gave us was really this icon, and then lots of support for how we walk in this way of reconciliation, healing, and justice. And I think what they realized first off is that we'll go a whole lot further together if there's something we're going to do, if there's a positive vision, and not just something that we're against, not just a new anti-racism training. So how many of you have done those, the anti-racism trainings? Sure, yeah. And how many situations have you been surrounded by people who are like, I did the training, I'm good now. We've heard that, we've heard people say that. But we're not done. We're not done, and there's a dream that's calling our names, and it's the dream of becoming the beloved community. It's the vision and the prayer for the human family, and the prayer that we started with. It's this vision of a community where arrogance and hatred no longer infect our hearts, where we are united in bonds of love and walls no longer separate us, a community where people of every race and nation and kind work together for God's purposes, hear God's purposes on earth. It's also the vision that Unitarian Universalist minister Clarence Skinner describes when when he says, just read this with me and let the words sink in maybe at a slightly deeper level. Beloved community is not an organization of individuals. It is a new adventure of consecrated men and women seeking a new world, who forget themselves and their passions, find a common life, where the good of all is the quest of each. What a beautiful vision. What a life to move toward. Say, imagine if we could be consecrated people set aside and blessed for a commitment, where after a while the sacrifice of kind of sometimes forgetting about what makes my small life better, I can let that go. Because I'm busy trying to figure out the common life where the good of all is my quest and your quest and your quest, where we're all seeking that together. Which actually strangely means we'll all be better off than if each of us was seeking our own way. Amen?
Amen.
Beloved community is that community where your pain and your suffering pain me, and where your hope becomes my hope, and your flourishing makes my heart sing. Beloved community is where I'm willing to take the risks and even give up some of my own way, if it means that we will finally become whole. Because we know that that's the only way we're getting to heaven, is together. Now, we didn't make this up. We got this dream from Jesus and his first followers. Jesus saw extreme pain and strife and oppression in his day, and he didn't run from it. He walked up to it. Think about it. He named it. He walked with the people who were hurting the most. Jesus chose silence. Just gonna say it. I don't know what Jesus you're following, but the one I know from Scripture chose sides. He chose the side of love over and over again. And he gave his life as a balm so that we might be healed and saved. He formed a ragtag alternative community where nobody needs because everybody shares. And this was a powerful community that healed and taught and prayed and loved and died for love long after Jesus was gone. They formed the original beloved community. And you can see about it in the Scriptures. I want to invite, if there's someone who'd be willing to kind of stand and offer this word, and the rest of us can really kind of listen and see where in this passage we can imagine beloved community. Would someone read this, please? Nice and loud. If you'll stand, that might help to carry. Thank you very much.
From 1 Corinthians, for just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in the one Spirit we were all baptized into one body. Jews are Greeks, slaves are free, and we were all made to drink of the one Spirit. Indeed, the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot were to say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, that would not make it any less a part of the body. The eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. If one member suffers, all suffer together with it. If one member is honored, all rejoice together with it.
We have another volunteer to read this passage. Read it.
then, remember that at one time you Gentiles by birth, remember that you were at that time without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenants of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace. In his flesh he has made both groups into one, and has broken down the dividing wall, that is, the hostility between us. So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are citizens with the saints and also members of the household of God.
Let these passages evoke images. See if there's a word or an image that's staying with you. Here's a fun. Would a volunteer please?
Behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, were standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd. He will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes.
So now right here at your tables, feel free to share a little of what you've heard so far. What's it bringing up for you about the beloved community? Is there an image from these scriptures or from our prayer book or from a hymn or any other place where for you, you're like, this tells me what beloved community is about? So feel free to share at your tables for a few minutes, and I'll give you a 1-minute warning when it's time to come back. So what do you picture? What do you imagine? What is this beloved community? What came up at your tables?
It's a place of truth and authenticity.
Amen.
Could you repeat that?
It's a place of truth and authenticity.
And to go along with that, there are no strangers or aliens. Everyone is known and included and on the inside.
Love that image.
It's a place where people look at each other and talk to each other and listen to each other.
We all need that.
Where fear is replaced with love. Where fear is replaced with love.
Where fear is replaced with love. Over and over and over again.
I actually saw a field of wildflowers with all different colors, and then different insects and pollinators that would come because of those colors, and it's like this diverse, beautiful ecosystem that gets light and rain and sustenance, and it's just in harmony.
That's a wonderful image, thank you. It reminds me of when I was in seminary, I got to study with Christopher de Rising, who was a South Indian theologian, and he used to say that the gospel is like a many-petaled flower, and each petal has a different color. And he said that the only way to really understand the gospel and to appreciate and receive the gospel is if you have that whole multicolored gospel flower. And so his thing was, you don't seek diversity because you want diversity for its own sake. You seek it because you know that there's one more petal that's going to reveal more of Jesus to me. I need that multicolored petal, all of the petals, to really get the fullness of the gospel. That sounds like that to you. Thank you.
We talked about getting out to Idris Mosque and getting out to other places where people are needing support and getting out of our chairs.
Getting out of our chairs. Yeah. Exactly. Beloved community, you'll take some risks. You'll be uncomfortable, but it's worth it because there's something beautiful on the other side of it, right? There is this beloved community, this vision of a world where we are knit together across our differences, and what I hope is that whatever image came to you, you'll keep that in front of you. Keep that image right there, because you're going to need that sign of hope when it gets hard, because it will. And when people say, are we there yet? And really, really need you to be done with this work. You'll need a vision. Maybe that's already happened. You will need the vision, the dream, and you need to be sharing it with each other in order to stay in the work. Amen? Amen. So, again, if you really want to live as reconcilers and healers in the Jesus movement, then take a deep breath and realize that we are not going to turn the tide with one more training or book study. I'm so sorry. Instead, notice the first word in this title. What's the first word, y'all? Becoming. So we are entering into a process of ongoing spiritual formation. Are we there yet? No. But that's okay, because we're not trying to get to whatever there is. We're not trying to arrive. We're not going to get to the there on this side of heaven. We are always becoming, which means we can relax and say yes to that ongoing spiritual formation, which is actually a very Anglican thing to do. Let's be clear. Like, we don't believe that salvation is a once and for all. We know that this is an unfolding process and that we are constantly being sanctified. The same is true around becoming a beloved community. So I find that our presiding officers especially found that the image of the labyrinth is a wonderful image for helping us to kind of crack open a different way of engaging this journey. Often when we talk about the work of racial justice and reconciliation and healing, we need to know that there's a point A, which is the crappy place we're in, and then there's a point maybe Z or M or whatever, where everything is better. And it's a straight line and we just need to get to it. That's not life. And that's not this work. And anybody who's been in it for a while knows that to be true. Instead, it really is like walking a labyrinth. And in this case, the Becoming Beloved Community Labyrinth incorporates these 4 quadrants, which are kind of the 4 areas that we have to address if we seek the wholeness of racial healing, reconciliation, and justice. Those 4 quadrants are telling the truth about our churches and race, proclaiming the dream of beloved community, practicing the way with Jesus, and repairing the breach in our society and our institutions. So those are the 4 quadrants of this labyrinth. But moving through it is kind of like moving through any other labyrinth. And actually, we were just at St. Columba's in Kent earlier today, and they have a labyrinth. And so I was kind of just like, darn, we did Way of Love there. I wish we'd done Beloved Community there so we could get people onto the labyrinth. Because once you're on it, you start to realize some things. There are things, y'all have them? Well, so let's go. So imagine that you're at the labyrinth. And so if you're maybe they're going out right now. So as you're walking the labyrinth, you're going to have some experiences. You're going to be cruising along, and maybe you church is engaging in this work of telling the truth, and now we're done, right? Wrong. Because what does the labyrinth make you do? You actually end up doubling back. And you're like, wait, we're still working on telling the truth. Oh, jeez, I thought we had done that. And then even when we were done, you kind of cross into another quadrant, maybe from planning the dream into practicing the way with Jesus. You'll start to go, and then, wait a second, I just ended up back at telling the truth again. Because the first time through, we were telling the truth about our church 50 years ago. Now we're telling the truth this time about our church today. Or maybe we were practicing the way by doing a book study at one point. And now as we're coming back around to this quadrant, we're practicing the way by engaging in a whole new way of doing racial healing training and storytelling. So there are a lot of things that can happen in every part of this labyrinth. And you don't get to really decide that you're done. Or that you've mastered a certain section, because the labyrinth is going to keep taking you in and out. And you just keep walking. And when you get to the center of the labyrinth, what happens? When you finally get to that place and you're like, oh, this is so beautiful. I did it. You're at the center, and then you know that, right? You get back up, and you walk back out. Again, traveling through these quadrants. But maybe seeing them afresh. Asking God to show you something you did not see the last time you were in that space. That's labyrinth walking. And that's actually the work of racial justice, reconciliation, and healing. The work, the ministry, the joy of becoming a beloved community. So, unlike a lot of labyrinths with this one, and we haven't figured out a way to depict this, but you can come in at telling the truth if that's where God has brought you. But your church may actually really be ready to practice the way, that is to do training and formation and videos and book studies and whatever. So maybe that's where you come into the labyrinth, and then you start walking. So don't get too hung up on the idea that there's a linear path. Let that go. Let it go. You enter, you make your way, and you kind of surrender to the fact that this journey is just going to keep on going. So let's start walking. If you'll stand as you're So imagine that now you're entering the labyrinth, and suppose we do enter, telling the truth about our churches and race. In this section of the labyrinth, we're looking at questions like, what racial and cultural and ethnic groups are even in my church? And who is around us? So maybe we start in this part of the labyrinth to tell the truth and just notice, just begin to notice that, oh, these are the people in our church. These are the people around the church. What's going on with that? How many of you in your churches have noticed that the membership looks different from the neighborhood around you? For whom is this the case? For a lot of our churches, that's the case. And what we're also finding is that a lot of churches think that everybody around them is like them. And in fact, they're not. Things have changed. The demographics have changed, but we haven't even noticed because we've just kind of been tight with our own group. So have a look and notice in our church what groups shape our common life, leadership, and worship. Who gets to hear their culture constantly reaffirmed, lifted up as holy, and who rarely, if ever, gets to hear that in your church or in our Episcopal churches? How has our church excluded or embraced different racial, cultural, and ethnic groups over time? Maybe another way of thinking of walking in this part of the labyrinth is to say that we are responding to the second promise in the baptismal covenant. Because here we're really listening as someone is asking us, we are asking ourselves, will you persevere in resisting evil? And whenever you fall into sin, repent and return to the Lord. And to this we say, I will with God's help. So have a seat. And as you have a seat, I want to invite you, again, at your tables, to do a little bit of truth-telling. And identify a moment when in your congregation or in the Episcopal Church, in your experience of our church, when you saw racial hierarchy, racism, racial oppression, discrimination happen. So in your congregation or in the life of our whole church, a moment. Because again, the truth-telling, it's got to start somewhere. So maybe we can practice it right here. So just take a moment in silence. Let yourself recall when you've seen that racial hierarchy, when you've seen certain racial or cultural groups privileged while others were shoved to the margins or held at the margins. When you've seen a culture lifted high while others were pushed low. Where you've seen certain cultural groups trusted while others were mistrusted. Whatever the signs, was there a moment when you saw racial hierarchy, racism in our church? I want to invite you now in groups of two, ideally pairs. If you have to have three, because that's kind of what's right there, it's okay, but ideally in pairs. Pair off and share with each other these moments. All right, so bring it back in. Feel free to bring it back in. And as you do, as you've now finished those conversations, that sharing, can you find a way just in silence to thank each other? Thank the other person that you were talking to for what they shared with you. Each of them. Just anywhere. So how did it feel? I like asking this question as a two-parter. First of all, how did it feel to remember that moment? How did it feel for you, especially in that silence at the opening, to even just call it back to your mind, to your body? How did it feel to go back there?
Angry.
You were angry? Sad. Yeah.
Disappointed.
Disappointed. Ashamed. Dread. Yeah.
This is just the way it is and it's normal.
Yeah. Yeah, this is just the way it is. Mhm. How did it feel to share it?
Liberating.
Awkward.
Yeah. Icky. What's that? Icky. Icky. Yeah. To say it, to speak it, to name it. Anything else? Tentative. What's that?
Like speaking about your own personal experiences, speaking about my own personal experiences and how I've been on the other end of it. So it's
Yeah.
like, how is this going to be perceived?
Yeah. Yeah. I've felt that. Thank you for naming that. I've definitely felt that. I'm like, okay, if I say this, am I now are they going to sort of renege on the offer of letting me be a part of this community? If I name what's happened while I've been in this community. Yeah. I hear you, sis. Yeah.
I just identify a sort of nihilistic side. Where coming from the place of privilege, I recognize that there
Can
are
folks hear? Okay.
No.
Oh, sorry. We have a mic.
There's just, when it comes to racial hierarchy, there is, like, I'm from the dominant hierarchy, and so I don't have to feel anything. I can recognize moments of that hierarchy, but I don't actually have to feel anything. And that's scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Does that resonate? Thank you. It's almost the flip side of what you were saying before about, like, if you're a person of color, often it feels like, oh, there it is again, you know, and we start to go numb a little because we're like, okay, when's it going to happen this time? Like, it's just a matter of when, it's not if. So yeah, it would be easy to go into that place of nihilism. I think it's, please. Can you stand if you're able, just to see if you can get your voice to project a bit? It's a bigger room, so thank you.
It feels very complex. Just somehow wrapped, you know, the churches are diminishing and our children have gone off and fallen in love with each other and are finding ways. There are new ways to make money off of it. Tonight they're doing a live performance of Archie Bunker and the Jeffersons on TV. It just feels very, very complex. Sometimes it feels like we got left behind and we need to figure out how to catch up and keep up.
Wow. We as church. We as church. Yeah. Yeah, like, there are so many places where, especially churches that are on the decline, the reason why is because the neighborhood is changing and they're not connected with it. We are getting left behind, and there's a cost to that. So you're right. Like, why is Sunday morning still the most segregated hour in American life? Even when neighborhoods begin to become more diverse, churches, faith communities don't. So what's going on here? I think this is where telling the truth it becomes so incredibly important, because we have to start naming it. We have to start naming it so that maybe it doesn't feel as icky over time. Or maybe it feels icky and that's good because icky is better than nothing, right? But if we tell it enough, maybe it'll start to break through whatever that haze is that we've been in. And you can be outraged. How about that? Like, we should be outraged by so much, and if we're not, something got switched off that needs to get switched back on. So if we tell the truth, maybe that switch will and we will come back to life again. You know, I have to be honest, I'll kind of just share a little piece of where I come from on this. Is that I didn't grow up in the Episcopal Church, and I actually didn't grow up thinking that the Episcopal Church wanted people like me. When I thought of the Episcopal Church growing up, and even just a few years ago, What I knew is that it seemed like the Episcopalians were the ones who had the most Mercedes in the church parking lot. I knew that they didn't clap or make a lot of noise like Baptists. They were the educated and classy Christians. How's that? And if you evolved enough, you might get to be them too. That's what my family thought. And I'm the first person in my family to go to college and grad school. So when I became an Episcopalian, it connected. For them, they're like, oh, of course Stephanie would do that. Because she's one of those people. And I'm sure that a lot has changed over the years. And yes, we do have Michael Curry as our presiding bishop, thanks be to God. But let's not kid ourselves. There's a habit, there's a tendency to put European English culture and music and heritage on a pedestal. And to rank people of color by how well we have mastered that culture. Are there any people of color who can say amen to that?
Amen.
Thanks. That we get judged and ranked based on how well we assimilate to Episcopal culture. And there's a word for that. And the word is white supremacy. Don't be afraid of it. Again, we have to start telling the truth. Tell the truth. That our church has from its very foundation, with Henry VIII, we have been an instrument of white supremacy, of Anglo supremacy. You don't get rid of that. You don't heal that with a few years and good intentions and a training and a curriculum. This is the work of a lifetime, our lifetimes. So please, walk that labyrinth. Tell the truth. Tell the truth. And if you'll stand as you're able, here's what we know is that telling the truth is only one part of this walk that we're on. And so, as we're walking, imagine that you've been walking and telling the truth, and now you're turning. So turn with me this way. And so as you turn this way, walking the labyrinth, what we're now seeing is proclaiming the dream of the beloved community. Another way of understanding this is to say that we've been telling the truth about who we have been and who we are around race, and it's icky and it hurts, and I'm ashamed and I'm mad and all of that. But now as we begin to proclaim the dream of the beloved community, can I say what I hope we can become? Because what we have been and what we are is not in Christ what we always have to be. And so as we turn in this direction, you might imagine that we are responding to the third promise in the baptismal covenant, where we're being asked, will you proclaim by word and example the good news of God in Christ? And we say, I will with God's help. All right, have a seat. As we're walking through this, feel free to even pull out, like, you've got these sheets. So each of these parts of the quadrants, each part of the labyrinth, there's sort of some description, and that's what I'm drawing on as we're sharing here. So feel free to follow. But in this section, you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity as church to proclaim the dream of the beloved community, and here's how you can do it. Organize strategic listening and learning gatherings in your community. So yes, we can tell the truth about who we have been as church, but then we can also extend that. And we can bring educators, church folks, other faith groups, civic partners, activists, elders, storytellers, bring them together to do events where we accomplish a few things. First of all, we gather. Together we examine the local history around race. So imagine if the church hosted this time of truth-telling about our history as a whole community. And we were talking a little last night about the fact that it's like, I'm sure there are stories for Washington State. Because I've actually done some of this work with Oregon, and they had to reckon with the fact that they were founded as a whites-only state. Now, I gotta figure that that's what was happening in Oregon. Y'all got some stuff, too. And it's some stuff that Native peoples can tell you. And it's some stuff that people of Asian descent can tell you. And it's some stuff that Latinos could surely tell you. And Black folk and other mixed race peoples can tell you. There's plenty to mine here. Imagine if the churches were the ones holding that space, inviting our neighbors, civic leaders, other faith communities, educators, to examine that history. Just look at it and name what's there. And then examine the current racial climate together. So say, here's what was going on, here's what's happening right now in our community. And listen to the folk who are on the ground doing the work. Let the church host the space where those folk can say what's up. And then together, imagine what would beloved community be? What would becoming beloved community look like in Capitol Hill? What would beloved community look like in Bellevue? What would beloved community look like in Queen Anne? What would beloved community look like in, help me out, what are some other names? All of those. All the things. Across this diocese, what would beloved community look like? And then once you've cast that vision together, publicly commit. Let the world know, and let the church be a part of putting that message out there. That, you know, we're not just against something, we're for something. Here's what we're for. We're for beloved community. You want to know what that looks like? We're glad you asked. Here's a vision that we've put together with all of these neighbors and diverse partners. Wow. Somebody's waiting to see that. We can be the ones to bring that. And then to invite even more partners to be a part of making it happen. And praying and singing and loving our way into that new land, that new way of being together. So that's practice, that's proclaiming the dream of beloved community. Now, if you'll stand with me. So we've been walking the labyrinth, kind of going this way. We're walking, we're proclaiming the dream that's happening, and now we're turning. This time we're turning. The labyrinth has taken us into the quadrant where it's all about practicing the way of Jesus. Practicing and learning how to be reconcilers and healers. Now, in this area, what you're going to be engaging is a lot of the stuff we think of when we think about anti-racism work. So this is where you're doing formation, anti-racism trainings, book studies, pilgrimage, story sharing, all kinds of things, where you're just kind of learning, and practicing new ways of being. So in this part of the labyrinth, you might imagine that you are responding to the fourth of the baptismal promises, where we hear the call, will you seek and serve Christ in all persons, loving your neighbor as yourself? And we say together, I will with God's help. Have a seat. So there are a whole lot of ways to do this. And actually, if you go to episcopalchurch.org/reconciliation, you will see a host of resources and most of these are formation resources. So some highlights are the Sacred Ground Film Dialogue Series. Anybody heard of this or even already started exploring it? Yes. This is a new curriculum that we've just created, and it's especially designed to help white people talk to other white people about race. Can I please get an amen on that? Because I'm tired, okay? Shit! Talk to each other! Anyway. This is my job. turning to the one person of color at the table and saying, explain race to us. And we have this idea that like white people are white allies. You've heard of this phrase, like being an ally, a white ally. Kelly Brown Douglas, who's just a phenomenal teacher, leader, she's the head of Episcopal Divinity School now, and I heard her say, she's like, I don't like white allies, I don't like that language. And now I know why. She's like, because white allies implies that people of color have a problem, and that white people are coming alongside to be helpful, to be allies. She's like, this is your problem. I'm not the problem. The problem is what white people build. The problem is white supremacy. The problem is not that I'm hurting. The problem is that somebody's hurting us. And so when she said that, she's like, so now I'm going to say that I'm a black ally to white people. It's like, good luck doing your work. I'm going to be praying for you. I'm happy to share and do whatever, but let's be clear that it starts with you. So Sacred Ground is a way for especially white folk to learn about racial history, including the history of whiteness, using films, but in a faith-based setting. So this is an Episcopal curriculum designed by Katrina Brown, who did the film Traces of the Trade, if anyone knows this like award-winning film that she did about a decade ago. And it's a film where she's kind of tracing the experience of her family looking at their history with the slave trade. And this is a rich family from Rhode Island. So already she's kind of had this experience of opening Episcopal communities to these conversations about race, and especially opening up Northern and other communities that think they don't have a problem. So now she's designed this curriculum with a team that's just been phenomenal and very diverse. And so Sacred Ground is out there now. We've been running webinars so that folks can learn about how to run a Sacred Ground study. And I think we're at about almost 500 people who've said, yeah, I want to lead circles. And that's in the first like month and a half, maybe 2 months. So this is what our hope is that if the Episcopal Church is 90% white, and it appears that it is, and those are the stats, that's not just me pulling out a figure. But if our church is 90% white, then maybe we have a special calling. If our churches are already mostly white spaces, then let's take that opportunity to get white people training to talk to other white people about race. So that's a part of how you might practice the way of Jesus. There's also Beloved Community Story Sharing. We've created resources and just a great process for folks to learn how to share stories of faith, race, and difference. And this is a project that's led by young adults. And so they can come to you and help you to learn how to share stories and how to do some of the deeper work in a structured way, and to build it into your church's life so that it's not just something you do on the side or on special occasions, but that story sharing simply becomes a part of life. So there are a lot of ways to engage this work, pilgrimage, you name it. But the point is, you don't have to have the answers. No one expects you to. We are practicing. We are learning together. You will mess up. People of color mess up. We mess up on each other's stuff. We mess up in the way that we do this work. White people mess up. Everybody messes up. Everyone is practicing. So just go. Just walk. Don't let the fact that it won't be perfect stop you from walking. Amen? Amen. And now stand as we make our way. So suppose that we've been practicing the way, and we've been walking that labyrinth, and we're practicing, and we're learning, and we're engaged in lifelong formation. And now we turn one more time, this time to the right. And now we are oriented in the labyrinth toward repairing the breach in society and in institutions. In this part of the labyrinth, we're exploring what social institutions and systems most clearly bear the signs of racial injustice and brokenness. And how can we participate in repair and restoration and reparation and healing of people and institutions and systems? You might imagine that as you're walking this part of the labyrinth, you're hearing the baptismal promise, that call, will you strive for justice and peace among all people and respect the dignity of every human being? And what do we say?
I will with God's help.
Have a seat. I want to acknowledge that this is big, this is hairy, this is scary, this is systems. This isn't just me and my church and our history. This isn't just me and my training. This is systemic racism. But at some point, we gotta go there. Here's the thing, we don't go alone. And if we can figure out a few places to address together, then we could actually have some impact. So our presiding officers have identified especially 3 areas where we're really going deep. One is criminal justice reform and reentry ministries. Hundreds of Episcopalians are working to dismantle the systems that incarcerate masses of Black, brown, and Native and Asian women, men, and children. A lot of churches are actually engaging in reentry ministries, which means that they are waiting when people come out of prison. Episcopalians are waiting to say, you know, if you want to really live a new life, we're here to walk with you in that. And it is beautiful. It's beautiful. I've sat with, you know, with New York stockbrokers whose churches are doing these reentry ministries, and these stockbrokers are sitting there with young men fresh from prison, and they're mentoring them, but they're being changed too. And they're helping these young ones to figure out that, maybe my life doesn't have to be what it was. It doesn't have to be the thing that got me in prison. And everybody's discovering new life. So we're finding lots of ways to intervene in that school to prison and just staying in prison pipeline. We're also intervening and sharing life and walking in solidarity with immigrants and refugees. I heard from somebody that this cathedral actually has provided sanctuary, and maybe he's doing that right now. Is that right?
Yes.
Amen. Amen. I'll bet you all have some stories about not only how that's been important for a person or a family, but how it's changed you. Yeah. Yeah. So this is a powerful ministry, and I think it's so powerful because wasn't Jesus a refugee? Doesn't it stand to reason that if you're walking side by side with refugees, you're going to end up closer to Jesus? So thank God that a lot of Episcopalians is doing that right now. And they're walking with minors who were in court, minors in immigration court, by themselves. Thank God for the Episcopalians who are saying, actually, I'll accompany that child. And it's not hard to find out the ways of showing up and making that difference. What are the areas of systemic, deep racial injustice that break your heart? And how could you work with other Episcopalians in order to be a part of the healing and repair of the breach? So I want to pause there and invite any questions you might have as we've now kind of walked that labyrinth. And we've made our way through, and we'll go to the last slide. Exploring telling the truth, exploring proclaiming the dream, practicing the way, repairing the breach. Are there any questions or comments that you have, please? And will you stand and be in the voice?
So I did used to live in the Deep South. I also lived in Idaho. When are we going to change the language? Racism is a social construct. We are all human beings. And when are we going to start talking about de-radicalization, people who have grown up with this hatred, who are hurting, but don't know how to ask for help? Because what I'm seeing is, in this country, is what you would see in, say, like Pakistan or Saudi Arabia. I see young people becoming radicalized into hatred.
Yeah.
And I don't know, talking about racism just seems to drive these people further, but if we start talking about radicalization, maybe changing the words might bring them back into the light.
Thank you for sharing that hope, certainly. What I'll offer, just to kind of walk with you in that, is that I think first of all, racism, naming racism is not the reason that those young ones are becoming radicalized. The reason is because it's not the naming of racism, it's the reality of racism. And I think it's important to to separate those out. A lot of people will say that President Obama was the one who caused a lot of our racial strife. Because when he was president, we suddenly were talking about race. And so for a lot of folk, they're like, we're talking about race and that's bad, because look how painful this is. What we didn't realize was that it's not the talking that's painful, it's the reality that we're naming. So maybe changing the words could help, but I think that it's also just being clear on what the words indicate. That really what we're doing is naming what's already there. If we weren't talking about it, it would still be there. The racism would still be there. It would just be unnamed and even harder to address. But the other piece here is that I was in South Africa with our presiding bishop in February, and a young person asked him a similar question. And what the young person said was, I feel like all this talk about racism keeps us in this negative place. And this young man was like, I feel like my whole life has been consumed with dealing with racism. And that was when the presiding bishop especially pointed this young man back again to this vision of the beloved community. So he's like, if your goal is only, I must eliminate racism. Racism, bad. I've gotten in trouble for this, but I'll say it anyway. In this work, we often tell white people, you are racist. You will always be racist. You'll be a recovering racist, but you'll still be racist. But then we also talk about anti-racism. And what I've wondered about is like, what does that do to somebody? To hear you're racist and now we're going to be anti-racism. It's like, I think what that might just produce in a lot of white folk, even without them realizing it, is this feeling you're against me. You're trying to erase me. That anti-racism is anti-me because I'm racist. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so that's part of why I have a commitment in our work. We have a commitment to not just talking about anti-racism, not just what we're against, but about racial healing and about the beloved community. Now the work may look exactly the same, but the language and the image that gives us, if it's an anti-image, I think that shuts down a lot of people. And I've seen it as an anti-racism trainer myself. I've been like, wow, we just lost the room. There were good-meaning white people, well-meaning white people who just shut down. And boy, I felt better because I had told them the truth and lost it. So I think maybe that's some of what you're naming as well, that we need to be able to say what we're for and not just what we're against, especially when it can start to sound like what I'm against is you. Thanks.
Thank you.
How do you know if you're making progress?
How do you know if you're making progress? I think that's actually, again, if we go back to the idea that what we're doing here is spiritual formation, right? So it's not just we're trying to we're trying to achieve a certain state, but we are in an ongoing process. So you know you're making progress because you're on the journey. Because you're still praying. Like, you know that you're making progress as a Christian because you're still praying, even when you don't feel like it, you're still praying. And you know you're making progress in this work because you're still having the conversations. Every conversation is a win. Even the ones that go really badly, it's still work that's doing something to your soul. So yeah, you know there's progress when maybe the makeup of your church starts to shift. You know there's progress when your neighbors say, hey, that's the church we work with whenever anybody wants to do something serious about race, because they've been fearless. You know there may be those signs of progress, but it may also simply be something inside you. So stay tuned to that, I'd say. I think you also know there's progress when you find the joy. When you realize that this is not just painful work, but that there's joy in it. Because we're getting closer and closer to Jesus as we walk this labyrinth. So every time you feel that closeness to Jesus, that intimacy in the practice, count that as blessing and as success. Is that helpful? Good.
I'm wondering, how do we create a sense of need to even have the conversations when the church is 90%, or in our local congregation even more than 90% white, and people don't necessarily feel this pain? Then how do you create the desire to have dialogue or a sense of need for transformation or for action in this area?
Yeah.
So I'm a mixed race person. I feel the tension of races not getting along or not. So I'm very eager to have more dialogue, but I don't sense that there's necessarily I can't do it on my own. I can't. I have to make that conversation happen. So any input on how to create a sense of need in a predominantly white setting?
This question comes up every single time. And it's partly because our churches are so segregated. And what that's created is a sense of comfort in a lot of churches and a sense of just ease with segregation. So a part of, I think, what we can start doing is some of this truth-telling, where, like, if there may be someone in your church whose heart is broken. And so if there's some truth-telling that can happen, then people who think, but everything's fine, will hear from other people in their own church, wait, everything's not okay. I think another thing that's real is that this moment right now, it's kind of hard for most Americans of whatever political persuasion to say that you're okay. Truly. So don't waste this crisis. You know? Like, we're in a moment right now when people on the left, the right, and everywhere in between will say, something's got to shift about race for us. And that may be the way in. We've actually designed Sacred Ground so that the idea is, the hope is that the groups, the circles for Sacred Ground, would actually be circles that are mixing across ideological class backgrounds. So it might be a group of mostly white people, but it would be white people, some of whom have, more college education, some less, some are coming from, an Episcopal church, others from a Baptist church. And part of what we're hoping is that we'll get better and better at naming and doing storytelling and learning with other, that the white folk can kind of do that together and increase that sense of urgency. Because I tell you, if you watch these films in Sacred Ground, and even if somebody just kind of comes in saying, yeah, sure, my church is doing a film series, okay. After the first few films, they're going to be like, shit. Stuff is broken. So I think that's, find ways of gently unmasking. But what I would submit to you is I think a lot of this has already been unmasked. And if it can be named from the pulpit, not as a part of judgment, but a part of observation, and in a way that invites people to acknowledge their broken hearts. Because I think this is the other key, is like stay with the broken hearts, stay with the stories. Don't start out with the politics of it. Because, and I'm not one who says that politics don't belong in church, because again, I follow Jesus, and like, I can't imagine he ever said those words. So it's not that don't bring politics in, but know how. Like prophetic preaching feels really good if it's all, I'm prophetic, I told that church what's what. Well, nice, and now they never want to have a conversation about it again. But you got to tell them. Instead, tell the stories, talk about your own broken heart around race. And that's an amazing way to open it up for other people too. Because everybody's got something where their heart's broken around race today. Yeah. Last question.
Sort of a two-parter. First, am I remembering correctly that environmental justice also falls under...
There you go. Oh, it's muted. Never mind. Okay.
Am I remembering correctly that environmental justice also falls under the reconciliation umbrella for the Episcopal Church?
Actually, we have another umbrella. There's a whole creation care umbrella. And we've been looking at the intersections. We live at intersections. So there's a task force on creation care and environmental justice. And that task force includes a group of people looking at environmental racism. So they are actually in the process of creating resources, listening to ways that Episcopalians are engaging in that work. So that's another way to repair the breach, honestly. So if that's where your heart is, basically that's where your broken heart is. This may be the way in for some folk. They're like, I don't really want to do stuff on race because I'm about the environment. Then it's like, can we talk Flint? Shall we talk Flint? Yeah. But anyway, there are all of those places of overlap and intersection. Meet people there, and then work with that brokenheartedness, and walk the labyrinth with them from that place. I've been told that at 8:15, everybody would shut down. So I feel like I've already pushed as far as we possibly could. So I just want to end by offering a blessing. Would you please stand? So my refrain throughout this time has been that if you really want to live as reconcilers and healers in the Jesus movement, that's been the refrain. I pray that you really will live as reconcilers and healers in the Jesus movement. Just as people of faith never assume that the day will come when we can stop praying or stop reading scripture or stop worshiping, those of us who are dedicated to healing the human family, we don't look to the day when we can be done with listening and learning, engaging, forgiving, challenging, and loving. We receive this as the way of life, a way of love. And so I give thanks right now to God who has given us this dream of beloved community. A community marked by unselfish love and wholeness, generosity and interdependence, where difference is cause for gratitude and not a cause for hatred. May God, the same God who gives us this dream, give you the strength, the courage, and the wisdom to walk and not grow weary, to keep telling the truth, keep proclaiming the dream, keep learning and practicing as healers and reconcilers, keep repairing what is so broken in the structures around us. May your light shine and spread until this old world is made new. Amen.